Welcome to the Ricecast. I'm your host, Dan Pigsley, sitting across from Pastor Willie Rice, fresh off of Thanksgiving. Pastor, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Good to be back.
Good. How you feeling about this weather right now?
You know, it's cold here in Florida, and I know we have some folks listen to this, and they laugh whenever we say it's cold in Florida. People in Canada, they go, you don't know. But it does get cold here. I think the thing in Florida is it doesn't stay cold much.
Right.
But it's been a kind of chilly week. Yeah, I had a fire going last night and a fire going Sunday night. And so it felt kind of nice,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
And it's I kind of I'm not a cold weather guy and being a Floridian. But I do like it up to Christmas.
Yeah,
it's okay. It's okay.
Uh-huh.
I like it. It's kind of fun. After Christmas, no, we're ready
Shut
to
it
go to
down.
the beach down here.
Shut
We're
it
like,
down.
we expect 72-degree weather
Right.
and low 66 and, you know, that kind of thing. That's us. And so after the Christmas is over, then we're done with all this nonsense.
Right.
But right now it is kind of
It's
nice,
nice, yeah.
to have the fire going and feel like, okay, we're getting close to the holidays. And it has been cold here.
Do you turn the heat on? Is the heat on in your house? Or
It
no?
is.
Really?
Oh, yes.
I can't do that.
No, it's on.
Good for you.
Well, it got in the 40s last night.
Yeah, get another blanket. That's what I tell the kids. I can't
I
do
got to
it.
have a little bit.
Yeah, my allergies, man, I can't.
Yeah.
Sarah's like, can we turn the heat on? I was like, sweetheart, I love you with all my heart, but it's just not going to happen.
Poor-
We can do it for 2 days. We're gonna do it right.
We're sorry for Sarah out there.
She's a
Please,
trooper.
Yeah. somebody send her some wood for the fire. or
Yeah,
something.
right. Well, they're baking. Her and the kids are baking like
Okay,
crazy.
well,
The
there you
house
go,
is
yeah.
the house is blazing hot. No
No,
matter
I get a
what,
little
so.
bit. I got to have a little bit of just when it's this cold. Yeah, a little bit.
How was your Thanksgiving?
Great. Thank you, and hope everybody listening had a good Thanksgiving. It's always we talked about this before. Always one of my favorite holidays. I think we may have shared this was kind of our off year. When you have your kids get up and get married and so forth, that then you start trading them off, you know, where 1 year they're with their in-laws and then 1 year. So we kind of have an every other year routine in our family where every other year we have everybody.
Right.
And usually we go up to the mountains to get a cabin or
Love
something.
that.
And so it's kind of been our tradition. And this was our off year, but it was still a wonderful time. We were at my brother's house with his family, and a couple of his kids were there, and then also my mom and dad came down. So good day. We had a great time,
Good.
and it's a beautiful time here in Florida.
A lot of good football on that Thursday too.
Well, the Thursday you get the NFL games,
Right.
so you get a little bit. But then Friday, Saturday, that is like the greatest college weekend maybe in the year. It's just fantastic. All the rivalry games, and if you're a college football fan, that's just part of the culture,
Right.
which you don't replicate, I think, in the NFL at all, how much a rivalry game matters. So you're going to have two teams that are both, 5-5 or something. But they have their game on Thanksgiving. They hate each other's guts, and
Yep.
where everybody's planting flags. Everybody got in trouble for planting flags.
What's your view on that?
Well,
I might be in the offshoot, but I want to hear your.
I'm a little conflicted, okay, because I know what I'm supposed to say, and I also know what I think.
Exactly,
And
yeah.
listen, I get it, the rivalries, and I've been on the other side of it plenty of times, so I'm not crowing. Even though the Florida Gators did win,
So great,
it was
yeah.
so the Gators did win. For all our FSU people, I know it's been a hard year. Believe me, I know. I've been there. I don't know if we've been 2-10 for a while, but anyway, for our FSU folks, I know it's been a hard year. I certainly don't want to rub it in because we haven't been too good ourselves. But Florida seems to be on a little bit of an upswing. But I get you shouldn't be. There's a sportsmanship.
Sure.
I do acknowledge that, and I think like our coach apologized after the game, and I get that. It's probably what a coach is supposed to do. But there is a part of me.
Right.
I just got to tell you, there's a part of me like, hey, these guys work hard. This is emotional. You don't want the other guy to plant his flag on your field. Go beat him.
Right.
That's kind of the way I feel.
I don't know. I same way, conflicted, but I love it. It's rivalry week. Like this is what it's about. You
Listen,
know?
I'll be honest with you, and I'm old enough I can remember, but they did this to us.
Sure.
Look, I remember FSU dancing around on the Florida logo, and I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Oh no, I didn't like it a bit. But it's kind of like, hey, So I think here's what I would say: don't plant a flag on the other team's logo. It's unnecessarily unkind. But don't make a big deal about it either, because it's not like they burnt down a building or something.
Right.
These are kids. They worked hard. They had emotion. And if you didn't want them dancing around your logo, you should have beat them.
I know. That's how I feel.
That's kind of the way I feel. So I don't think you ought to do it, but I don't think it's that big a deal either.
Right. Yeah.
And I think Shannon Sharp, who's not a Gator fan or a
Right.
Florida State fan, he was commenting on this. He said, shoot, if it were me, I'd have stole the horse and the spear and run around the stadium. So that's what he said. I didn't say that, but he said that. So, kids are just going to have a little fun. And
Right.
to me, it's not a federal case.
Good.
But that's it. And, if, my Florida State friends might disagree
Right.
also. And
It was a fun weekend, though.
But it is a fun weekend. Football's an emotional game.
It is.
It's a violent game and a controlled violence, and it's an emotional game. And these kids, it's like kind of war.
Yeah.
And in sport, it's really. I mean, some people may not like it, but that's why we like it.
Yep.
That's why I think people are drawn to it. So. But anyway, the season's over now. They're having playoffs. We'll see how all that goes,
Right.
and some bowl games, and of course the NFL gets serious here the last couple of weeks, and Tampa's in the thick of it. We're not the best team out there, but we're in the thick of it, and won a game Sunday we probably shouldn't have won. Got a little bit lucky. But you have to get that.
Yep.
We've lost a couple we probably shouldn't have lost. So, anyway, sports are fun, and we celebrate those around the holidays also.
Maybe next year we'll do just one sports podcast because there's so many takes I want to hear from you.
And I know people that's why they tune in.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's theology test second, but they want to know about the sports thing. No, we enjoy it and have a good time with it. And I'm old enough to know, listen, I've been there where it hurt really bad, so I don't like to rub it in on people because I've been there where it hurts when your team loses, and it feels good when they win.
Right.
So, but it's going to happen. It's happened before. I remember I took Steven, and I guess our kids were there. We went to first SEC road game I ever took them to was at Auburn, and of course that's a really tough place to play. Great fans, and so they're kids, and we're walking in the game, and they're getting yelled at and hollered at and cussed at, and I just kind of tried to prepare them because they had not.
How old were they?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Remember, a couple years old, maybe 4 or 5, something.
Oh,
like
wow. All right.
that. I took Steven to a game. He was like 3 weeks old. No, that's true.
I love that.
That is, that's true. It's a terrible story, but I mean, he was born in October. I went to a game in November.
I love it.
But he's like 5 or 6 years old. We're going to Auburn, and they won that night, beat us. And so we're coming out and they're hooping and hollering,
Rolling the tree.
We're feeling terrible. And I just happened before, it'll happen again.
Right.
It's just part of the experience that you have those nights, and that's what makes the good ones so much fun.
Right, and it's so funny. Again, we'll get to the meat of the podcast in a minute, but I just have one
Maybe
story.
not. I don't know.
We'll figure it out. But so Paxton, my 5-year-old, he's a big Michigan fan, and we don't know where it came from. So last year, at the start of the season,
helmets or something,
Well, and I asked him, I said, "Why do you like Michigan?" He goes, I like their jerseys, I like their colors." And so he asked for a Michigan sweatshirt for his birthday and a Michigan pillow for Christmas, and so he got those things last year. And so he knows Michigan Ohio State's coming up, and he's 5, and he is obsessed.
But he knows it's a big game.
He knows it's a big game.
Isn't that great?
So he sits next to me on the couch, and I looked at him, kind of probably the same thing you did with Steve, and I said, "Buddy,
this is
not going to be fun for you to watch." And then I'm sitting there, I'm like, dude, this is awesome. It is one of the worst football games I've ever seen, but it was just it was just ugly, but it was so fun to watch Ohio State lose.
And we've got Ohio State and Michigan people here, and that is maybe the quintessential rivalry.
It is, yeah.
And how Ohio State lost that game, I don't know.
Wow.
They were like 22-point favorites or something, but their offense could not do anything.
Yeah.
So,
but it goes into rivalry week. That happens.
Yep, it happens. It happens.
You think Ryan Day keeps his job?
Look, if you're an Ohio State fan, I get it right now. I get why you're mad and angry. Listen, you guys win 11, 12 games every year.
Right.
I promise you, having been through Florida football the last 10 years, it can get a lot worse.
Yeah.
It really can be a lot worse. So, I'm old enough to remember, it wasn't that long ago, Jim Harbaugh had a tough time beating Ohio State.
Right.
He went like 5, 6 years, couldn't beat them. And I remember John Cooper back in the day. Some guys will remember him. He was a great Ohio State coach. They had big teams. They struggled with beating Michigan.
Yeah.
I mean, he went a lot of years, probably why he ended up losing his job. But I would not fire a coach that is in the college football playoffs and is there almost every year. I'd be really careful about firing that coach. It can get a lot worse, believe me.
Yeah,
so
good point.
But if you don't beat Michigan, you're not going to beat Ohio State very long.
That's the thing, man. So, but rivalry week's over. It's kind of Thanksgiving's over. The season has kind of shifted. Is your tree up at the house yet?
Oh yeah.
Good for
The
you.
day after, Cheryl and I were again because we were home. Next day we were at it.
Good.
And Friday, Saturday, she worked really hard.
Yeah.
I worked a little, but she worked really hard, and she does a great job. To me, our house, just makes it so beautiful.
I love that.
And so the tree's up, all the lights are on. And
you decorate outside as well?
Yeah, a little bit,
Okay.
Not a ton, not like Griswold or something,
Don't come to my house. It's there's lights everywhere, blow-ups everywhere, everything.
But we got some nice stuff. It's a fun thing.
Good. But Christmas at Calvary, so many things that come down the pipe, and you said it yesterday in a meeting. Like this is that time at Calvary where everybody's just on the gas pedal, and we're just excited about it, and just excited to see what the Lord does.
It's a great time for all believers, in every church. It's a special time of year, and it sounds like a cliche, but it really is. And this year seems to be a little quicker because Thanksgiving was so late. So I mean, we're just right out of the gate in it, and it'll be over here before you blink an eye, like. Couple weeks from tomorrow, like 2 weeks or something tomorrow, or something like that. 3 weeks, or something. It's gone. So it's coming at us quick. We have a lot of really great dates. I mean, we can talk about a lot of things. We do the Christmas nights of worship. We do the Christmas Eve service. So we have the Christmas series going on. Some of our campus have some parties and fellowships. We're doing a little hymn sing here at our Clearwater campus. We haven't really mentioned that one Wednesday night. The Wednesday night, I don't think this is out anywhere. So
I don't know.
Breaking news.
You're telling me something. I'm excited.
Breaking news.
Yeah.
Right. Breaking news here is the Wednesday night before Christmas on the 18th. We always have kind of a chapel service on Wednesday night. Again, you may go to another campus and you need to be on those campuses, but that Wednesday night on the 18th, we're going to do kind of like just a hymn sing Christmas carol night. On the Clearwater campus. So if you just want to be in the chapel and we sing some stands on the piano.
Well, that's enough to get me there.
Stands on the piano, and we're just going to sing and maybe have a little devotional. But it'll be a wonderful night.
I love that idea.
So if you missed out on one of the hymns, like Christmas songs, you can come that night. We'll try to sing them all.
What time is 6 o'clock? 6:30?
6:30.
6:30. I love that idea.
Yeah. So and maybe some of the other campuses will do that too. Kind of we put that in late.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be fun. So Wednesday night, the 18th at 6:30 in our chapel. Beautiful chapel. I love that place.
Yeah.
It's where we have staff meeting. It's just a great place.
It is a beautiful time, yeah.
So it's good stuff. Then you have we have a couple events this coming weekend, I think, here at Clearwater. We have a women's tea.
Oh, yeah, the women's tea is this weekend, and I guess that's just at Clearwater, is that right?
There's one at Clearwater, women's tea at Clearwater, a women's tea at Eastlake, and then we do something at Seminole called Gifts of Grace. Okay. So we do our tea in March.
I got you.
But Gifts of Grace, all of our women and our children come together and they pack stockings, and they go out and they go sing carols and do some ministry to some homeless shelters some old folks' homes that we partner with.
Nursing centers.
So we have good partnerships with two out there. So great events coming up. So
those are all fun.
Yeah.
So if your campus isn't doing something or you want to come, check. I'm sure it's online.
It is. Yep.
Anybody's welcome. That's the nice thing about being kind of in this family of churches and campuses together. So if you're at Safety Harbor or wherever, and you're welcome to the women's tea. Big one in Clearwater, and I guess Eastlake also is doing it.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
So either place will be fantastic. And those are great events coming up this weekend. And, of course, we continue our Christmas series that we launched last week.
Yep, and that's exciting. So it's really when I was in college, in high school I was not a great student. I think, teacher assigns a paper, you write it the night before, right? Okay. That's how I go. And then when I'm in college.
You're the only one that's ever.
Right, no. I was it. I'm the only procrastinator on this planet, I feel like sometimes. But in college, my first real paper was a 20-page paper on John chapter 1.
Oh, wow.
And so, you kind of pitch this idea this summer to kind of go over the prologue of John for Christmas. And my first image was writing that 20-page paper. Like, I don't want to do that at all. So
you're ready, man. You're ready.
But we did launch this incredible series, really just talking about who Jesus is. Some people will call it the Christology of who Jesus is. And so I would like just to spend some time as we're just on the podcast this week and the next few, just diving a little bit deeper into what we're talking about on Sunday mornings. So kind of walk us through what did we do this past Sunday? What was the topic?
Well, John 1 is a great, sometimes called a prologue. It is like an introduction, and it's a combination of poetry. I don't know if poetry is the right word, but it's written very poetically and beautifully, and prose. This is what happened. And you'll see it where he's talking about these big overarching spiritual concepts, and then he'll say, and John the Baptist said this and that. So a little bit of both. It's different than Matthew and Luke's gospel. Now, Mark just kind of jumps right into John the Baptist. He's, and some say that's the earliest gospel, and that the later gospels add things.
He was trying to get out before everybody else
did. Maybe trying to beat a publishing deadline.
Yeah.
But Matthew and Luke include what are called birth narratives, and we get all those traditional stories usually from either Matthew or Luke. Shepherds in the field, Luke, wise men, Matthew. You get those stories. Angels appearing to Mary, all of that. Luke is kind of the quintessential one, but we get some of those stories from Matthew. John is probably the latest gospel, and is sometimes called the Maverick Gospel. Sometimes Matthew, Mark, and Luke are referred to as synoptic gospels, which means they're similar. There are similarities. Usually, if you find a story in Matthew, you'll also find it in either Mark or Luke, and sometimes both. A lot of the material, and in seminary you have entire classes on this, and there are entire theories, not all of which I subscribe to, but there are theories behind why they're the same, some of which I think are nonsense. Q source and other things. I won't go into that, but those of you that have studied it will know what I'm talking about. I think, hey, these guys just wrote the gospel, and they're telling the same story, and maybe there was some oral history they're relying on, but they're telling their story, and why wouldn't there be a lot of overlapping and similarity? So you have Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Then John, though, is like, wow, were you watching the same movie? And as you watch it, of course, he was, but it's like somebody who has watched the exact same thing, but he's kind of giving you a little different take. Some of the stories are the same. You see some commonalities, feeding of the 5,000. There are other stories. And yet there are a lot of things in John you go, wow, I didn't see that in the other Gospels, or things that were in the other Gospels that are not in John. And the reason is, I've often said, is when you go to the end of John, John tells you he's writing so that you would, but he says, I could have told you a lot of other things.
Right.
He says, I could have told you so many stories. There are not enough libraries and books to hold them. But he said, I'm telling you these things so that you will believe.
Yep.
So John is like an author who is having the other Gospels having already been written. I think he probably had already read and was certainly familiar with what Matthew, Mark, and Luke had put out there. These things are being circulated among the church. But John is now telling the story, again, as somebody who was the closest to Jesus of the disciples, the inner circle of the inner circle. And he's laying out an argument to convince us Jesus is the Son of God. And so he's telling stories not just to tell the story, but to send a message. Like, I need to tell you these stories in particular. And if you look at John, you see, there are like, sometimes I've called them the 7 sermons, the 7 statements, and the 7 signs. And we actually did the 7 statements earlier this year, the I am statements of Jesus. So John's gospel is written, in a unique way. And that's what first of all, every Bible student needs to understand. So John 1:1 tells the story of the beginning, but it doesn't talk about Bethlehem, shepherds, or mangers, or any of that. But that doesn't mean it's not a Christmas chapter. I think it is, because it's giving us the majesty behind what happened on earth. It's giving us the eternal vantage point. And John 1 takes us back to Genesis 1. But now it's like, now let me tell you a little more, let me give you a little more information. So if Genesis 1 begins, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, John 1:1 says, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God, and everything that was created through him. So he goes back to Genesis 1:1 almost and says, let me read you Genesis 1:1 again, but now let me tell you the story of Jesus. He was there at the beginning. He is the creator. And he becomes a man, and that's how we see who God is. So it's this powerful chapter that, as much as any chapter there are many, by the way, but as much as anything, we build our Christology over some of the fundamental foundational truths given us in John chapter 1. And again, the Bible is consistent. Our Christological understanding is throughout the New Testament. It's not one place. But I'm just saying John 1 is as foundational as any single passage.
And so this past week kind of launched into this, just studying John 1, and you already kind of you quoted the first verse, as in the beginning was the Word, but that word, it carries a lot of just a lot of meaning behind it.
Yep.
And we spent a good amount of time in teaching team, and I think on Sundays even unpacking what that word really means. And the word is logos. And could you unpack that a little bit more for me?
Yeah,
right
we did try to take some time on it Sunday, and sometimes if you've studied the Bible and read, you know something, and so you think everybody else knows it, And so in our teaching team, we get all our campus pastors together and some of our other senior leaders and who are Bible teachers, and we talk about the passage and talk about what our main points are going to be and that kind of thing. And we all felt like, hey, we need to spend some time on this. And I don't like to throw out Greek words, a lot. We know the New Testament was written in Greek, most of it. And so it's important. Bible students for years have studied Greek. We have resources. There are Greek scholars certainly know a lot more than I do. But I've never liked to be one. Some pastors, it's almost like they want to impress you with how much they know. So every sermon there's 3 or 4 Greek words. Most of our people don't read Greek. They read English. So, anyway, I think you can do that too much.
Yeah.
That's my personal opinion. But sometimes there's a word so important, you need to just stop and go, okay, let me do it. Because the word, it leaves us a little confused. What does it mean the word was God? What are you talking about? How can a word be God? How can, So we needed to double click on that word and say, okay, let us talk about what the Greek word is that's being translated here and why John is using it. And as you said, it's the Greek word logos. And we had some information in there Sunday about it, and it means, some of the resources we looked at, depending on whether you were coming from a Jewish perspective, maybe it meant one thing. From a Greek perspective, maybe it meant another. In the Greek mind, it has to do with kind of this force in the universe, this almost, I think we said at one point, the reason there is a reason,
right.
And I asked the question at the beginning, why is there something rather than nothing? Well, John goes back and says, well, because in the beginning was the Word. It was with God, it was God, and it made everything that is. That's the answer. By the way, that's the best answer you'll ever hear. And so we spent a lot of time on that. The Logos is the reason there is something. The Logos is this power. Now, some Jews would talk about it as the wisdom of God.
Right.
Some Jews talked about it as the creative power of God. But I think one of the best lines, and I think it was from one of Danny Akin's articles that I read this, and it was quite good. I think Dr. Akin said this. The word logos doesn't fully define Jesus, but Jesus fully defines the concept of logos.
Huge point.
I thought it was great. So John is pulling this word that the Greeks would have used a little bit and the Jews would have used a little bit, and it's describing like this. I don't like this illustration. I'm sure it falls really short. But, like Star Wars people talk about force in the universe, force. And, people, are they talking about God? Are they talking about... I don't really know what they're talking about. I'm not a Star Wars person. But it's sort of like that, that there's this idea of this, there's the reason, there's a reason. Yeah. There is this force, there's this wisdom. And John is now personifying it. Okay, it's almost like John saying, you're getting close.
Yeah.
It's there. You're right. There is something spiritual there that is responsible for everything that is. Now, let me tell you who it is.
Right.
And it's Jesus.
Yes.
It's Jesus.
And that's the beautiful thing of, and again, I spent a lot of extra time kind of studying this, even after Sunday, because it just piqued an interest that, you learn about it in school, but then you're like, I haven't been there in years. I've had 15 kids since then,
Yeah.
And so the more I kind of looked into it, like the term logos, it came around like 500 BC from a Greek philosopher named Hercules. And it was just kind of how you unpacked. And so that term had been around forever.
Yeah,
and the Stoics got a hold of it, and then it just kept growing. And then John, seeing what's around him, seeing how people are talking, uses what's around him to point people to Jesus. Yeah. Such a cool concept.
It's like, you guys understand there's something there.
Right.
And it's like you hear secular people even today talking, they'll talk about, they don't know God, they're not Christians, but they might talk about, I believe in a God, or I believe in a creative force. There's some, whatever they talk about. And they use words to try to describe. But what they're saying is, there's spiritually, there's a there. And it's like, okay, that's not enough. I mean, we need to know more about God than that. But it's a start. Okay, let me tell you about the there that
Yes.
is there and has always been there and is the reason that everything exists. It's not a force, impersonal, unknowable. It's a him,
Yes.
knowable, personal, and his name is Jesus. And the person that was born in Bethlehem and who walked on the earth 2,000 years ago in human flesh is that person, is that force, is that power. Jesus is Lord. And so to me, it's like John takes this ill-defined, almost difficult to define concept, and he grabs it and he draws it into theology and says, that's who Jesus was. And the neat thing I thought, Dan, is I taught through the message is this. Again, remember, John was there.
Yeah.
He knew him. He's not writing from a theoretical standpoint, and he's not some theologian in a library writing. He was there. He knew Jesus. And he's remembering back now as an older man probably, and he's saying, let me tell you who he is.
Yeah.
He's the Word. He was with God in the beginning. He was God. And so why is this a Christmas passage? Because of verse 14, the Word, this essence, this force, this power, this wisdom, the Word became flesh.
Yes.
It became a man and dwelt among, he became a man, I should say, and dwelt among us. And that's the power of this idea of logos. You'll never find a secular reference to logos that fully defines Christology.
Right.
But you realize that John takes this kind of vague idea and says, okay, let me tell you what it really is about.
And so John, he opens up, John chapter 1, I think it's like verse 1 through 3, and he talks about like the eternality of Christ. Like he's always been, he always will be. And then you jump down to verse 13, 14, and it talks about the Word becoming flesh. And there's a word that is thrown around a lot. It's incarnate. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
It just means to take on, we use like the word carnal to describe in flesh. So incarnation is to take on flesh. It is to become flesh. It's like God, clothed himself, became flesh. And that's the miracle of Christmas. You say, well, that's kind of a miracle. Exactly.
Right.
No, that's exactly what it is. It's a miracle. God became man. And that is why Christmas is extraordinary. I started out saying this is not another birth narrative. There are a lot of birth narratives. George Washington, whatever, and even in the Bible, Samson, Jacob, Esau, on and on. John the Baptist, on and on. But this is not just another birth narrative. This is the story of God becoming man, God incarnate in human flesh so that we could know him. That's the beautiful thing.
And I said this on Sunday morning. This is the moment where the Creator stepped into his creation. And that's the miracle of Christmas. You just said that. That is what it's all about. But then the passage continues, and it tells us why he did it. Yeah. And that's where I know you, like a teaching team, you parked on this.
Yeah, we jumped down to that 14 to 18 section, and we're going to come back and pick back up at 4 this week and do the second part. But we had to jump down because to me it's hard to read 1 through 3 without reading verse 14. It's hard to read the word was without going to verse 14. The Word became flesh. But then it says, we beheld his glory, so we observed his glory. In other words, we see him. We see him for who he is. And we said, how can you know God except Jesus came? And there are a lot of people who have assumptions about God. They don't know where they came from. I talked about a man I talked to one time, and he said, well, I just believe God's a God of love. And I go, well, that's great. Where do you think you got that? Like, why would you think that? The ancient Greeks didn't think that when they described spiritual gods. The Romans didn't think God's a God of love. In fact, most people don't think that.
Right.
If you look at the Eastern religions, God is more impersonal, kind of a force in the universe. Even our Muslim friends, I don't know that would speak of God as a God of love. They would speak of a God of power, a God of greatness, a creator, a ruler. But Jesus comes and reveals a God who loved the world so much that he would send his one and only Son. So that God is both great and good. To me, the two poles of a theology of God, an understanding of God, are his greatness and his goodness. You can, I think, park every attribute under greatness or goodness. The greatness of God, his transcendence, his power, his all of that, and then the goodness of God, that he is intrinsically good, that he is holy, that he is loving, that he is merciful. And those two things go together. Neither overshadows the other. They fit together perfectly. The God who is great and good, the God who is merciful, his love endures forever. So Jesus showed us that. That's the message of Christmas. Jesus came so we can know who God is. And then we don't just observe his glory, we receive his grace.
Right.
And it talks about how the grace upon grace, and we talked about that verse 16, which I love so much, the grace upon grace from his fullness. I just love that phrase, grace on top of grace, grace over grace, grace and more grace, and that's the way God has responded to us, grace on top of grace with Jesus.
Yeah. And that's, so I'm preaching this past Sunday, and we talked about that grace upon grace. Like, how do you explain that? And so I thought of a beach baptism back in October. I don't know if you use this as well, but me and Pastor Joe, worship pastor down in Seminole, I told the joke on Sunday. Joe's about 120 pounds less than I am. Yeah. He's a little guy, and so we're walking out in the water, and the waves are just crashing over our heads. It's nuts, right? And then I started thinking about that. As I was preparing for Sunday, it's like, this is what grace upon grace is. I'm in the grace. Like, when I became a believer in Christ, like, he dumped me into his ocean of grace.
Oh, that's good.
And then as the waves continue,
upon wave,
wave upon wave, it's just grace upon grace.
That's a good picture. No, I like it.
Yeah, and so it's just one of those things, like, when you put that visual to it, you're just like, this is incredible.
Yep.
Like, I am totally, completely secure in love. And I think I mentioned last week, Paul tells the church in Ephesus, he lavishes his grace on. It's more than enough. And I think so often, I want you to speak to this as well, I think so often those that are young in their faith, they see the Lord as this judgmental figure who is just, waiting to strike them down with a lightning bolt. And like you said, the ancient Greeks are, our Muslim friends kind of see the same thing, but that's just not who he is.
Yeah, it's an incomplete picture. If you're asking, is God great? Yes. Is he holy? Yes. Is he a God of judgment? Yes. He wouldn't be a good God if he wasn't, because some things are evil and must therefore be judged. So we should all be grateful that God is a God who wants to, I don't know how much he uses thunderbolts, but probably not as much as some of us wish he would sometimes, but that's why he's God and we're not, because he'd probably shoot a few at me. I guarantee you. But he's not just great. He's good at the same time. Right. He is the God who is perfect and righteous, who has stepped into creation then to lavish his grace upon us. So we shouldn't think of his lavishing grace as some kind of weakness or some kind of enabling of sin. No. He is great and awesome and mighty and a God of judgment, and yet the God who has lavished his grace upon us. We have to understand both those to appreciate either side of that. Right. But you're right. You're right about like young believers or people who are trying to figure this out maybe and still growing. We're all growing in our faith, of course. Right. So maybe we're all trying to figure this out. But, the human religion is a quid pro quo. I say that oftentimes. It's a quid pro quo, which is Latin for something for something. You do something for me, I do something for you. It's how the world works. It's like you go to the store, I give you $10, you give me something. I give you something, you give me something. I got $10 because I did something for somebody. That's how the world works. I get it. And we're used to kind of trading favors for that. Hey, I'll help you move this weekend, but you need to help me paint my house the next weekend, And we think about God that way. And human religion is predicated on a quid pro quo religion. And we keep thinking God is like man, that if I do this for God, he'll do this for me. And really, it's a way to kind of control God, and it's a way to kind of manipulate him, and it's really making ourselves God. So if I go to church, or I keep this rule, or I do this, then God is going to do this. You don't want a quid pro quo, because you don't understand how in debt you are. You don't want God to give you what you deserve. You don't understand how righteous and holy he is if you think that. Because if you understood that, you'd realize, no, I don't want something for something, because I know what I'd be getting. No, I need grace. Yeah. I need grace. And I don't earn the grace of God. I receive the grace of God. So it's a beautiful picture there in John 1 that he was born so we could see his glory and we could receive his grace.
And it was a great Sunday. And, I think it's leading to many more great Sundays to come. So, we're going to cover, Jesus is the light this week.
Yeah, we got 4 messages, and we're using the L words to kind of help you remember it. Logos, that's a funny one because that's not an English word, but we're going to use it. I could not use it because of the L, Logos. But then we're going to see Jesus is the light, and then we're going to talk about Jesus as the Lamb. John will say, here's the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And then Jesus is Lord. And as we build right up to Christmas. And every week is focusing on the coming of Christ at Christmas. And, all of our campuses are beautiful. They're decorated. Last week, Clearwater wasn't because it takes about a week to do that one. So we're
still doing it today.
They're working on it as we do this. But by Sunday, everything is going to be beautiful. Christmas music, we're singing Christmas hymns every Sunday. We have them ready to go this Sunday, and we're just celebrating the Advent season. But we're walking through John 1 to see who Jesus is, because that's why this is special.
And it all leads us to Christmas Eve, which is, if you come to Calvary, that is one of the most special times.
It's beautiful.
Our Christmas Eve services, and all of our campuses have their own Christmas Eve services. You can find those online.
Yep.
But when it comes to just celebrating the Christmas season, like we do a great Christmas Eve service, but in 2 weekends, it's our Christmas night of worship. It's the 14th and 15th of this month. And man, I sing his praises often, but Pastor Kyle Mullet, I mean, it's just incredible to see what he continues to do with that team.
We're so grateful for Kyle. He's doing a fantastic job leading here at Calvary. And what's fun about those nights, 2 nights of worship, 14th, 15th, is all of our campuses. We have all these talented musicians, singers, but we have to spread them across 6 campuses. So it's kind of hard. And he's doing a great job building that team. But it's really fun. I mean, it's really fun when we bring them all together. By the way, your wife's one of them, right? She can sing. Can you sing as good as she can? Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
I can't even hum.
Yeah, so we bring her in. Of course, Joe from your campus. But, we have Ethan and Ashley from the East Lake campus. I don't know who all is doing stuff, but usually it's somebody from every campus. And so, wow. Plus we've got a little choir going, a worship choir collective, I think they call it now, the Worship Collective.
Right.
It's choir, but new name there. And but 2 nights, it'll be a wonderful 2 nights of worship. And as you said, Christmas Eve. And here, can I throw this out? These are great events. Please don't miss the opportunity to invite somebody.
Right.
This is an easy invitation. We've got invitation cards. This is an easy invite. Sometimes I've even told people, look, I remember inviting a friend, hey, it's Christmas. It's like, it's Christmas. I think it's against the law not to come to, it's not true, but you could use it. You just, you kind of wink and smile. Hey, it's Christmas. Come on. And you'd be surprised who's open to that invitation. So you don't want to go through this, do you? And think, I didn't even, I mean, that's like bottom shelf. Like, at least I could have invited them. Like, at least I could have handed out a card and said, hey, don't know what you're doing at Christmas, but, man, we got a great weekend coming up with music and Christmas Eve service, and you'd be so welcome. I'd be glad to sit with you. And isn't it worth trying? And who knows that somebody might come. And I'll tell, maybe we're closing here, but I'll close with this quick story. I remember I prayed with a guy to receive the Lord a few years ago who had come on a Christmas Eve. And I didn't know him, but somebody said he was dying. He was sick. I didn't know the man. They said, would you go see this man? So I went to see him. And he had come from another religious background, and he'd been involved in, really, it's a cult group in our area anyway, so you can fill in the blank. But we got to talking about the Lord, and he said, you don't know this, but he said, the first time I ever walked into your church was like 2 years before. He said, on a Christmas Eve. And I sat in a Christmas Eve service, and I thought, this is what he said, I've never felt this kind of love. He said, this was something I had never experienced. And he was a lost person, but he said, I'm sitting there, and I'm saying, okay, there's something in this room that's different. I don't have this. These people have this. There's something here. And, I just, who's out there on the other side of your obedience that might sit in a room and go, okay, maybe there is something to this Jesus story. And we try to share the gospel at all these events. So please think about who you can invite and let's invite out down there Seminole, East Lake, Crystal Beach, Safety Harbor, Clearwater. Let's Hispanic campus. Let's invite people to come and be a part of these events.
That's true. And then you can go. I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit this weekend, but that invitation is you carrying the light that Christ has given you, and it's a huge. I love what you said. It's who's on the other side of your obedience. I don't know if I've ever heard it put that way, but it's such a true statement. Like it's an act of obedience, and I would encourage you, as the pastor said, it's Christmas. Like people know what we're doing around Christmas time, and so I would encourage you to invite them to those events. Pastor, I love it. I love this season. Love being able to continue to dissect this stuff with you. Just one last question: what's your favorite tradition during Christmas time?
Christmas,
yeah.
Wow, and it sounds like a homer to me. That Christmas Eve service really is my favorite.
So make sure you invite people.
Yeah, that moment is just our family. There's so many little things we do, but usually after that service, we go back home, and of course Amanda's family is close by now. Now Anna and her family and Stephen and their family. We're not always together on Christmas Eve. But we're usually, sometimes we are, but they have kids now, and so we see them around Christmas, and Stephen's certainly involved in ministry, so he has things he's doing on Christmas Eve. But, to be able to be with family on that Christmas Eve night when we come back, that's just a sweet time, and to anticipate the day's great, but it's really like the anticipation leading up to it that's even better. And so for me, that's just a wonderful, wonderful time.
Well, Pastor, I appreciate it. Look forward to the season, spending time with you, spending time with our church family. Everybody listening, you are more than welcome to come to any of our services, Wednesday night, Sunday morning, to any of our campuses. It's a great time to plug into Calvary as we continue to look at who Jesus is. And this week we'll be talking about Jesus as the light. And we also have our great More to Come, initiative going on as well, which is exciting. Get to hear a lot of the things that the Lord has done, get to be grateful for those things, which is incredible. And we'll put a link into that underneath the podcast today. We'll talk a little bit more about that next week and the weeks to come. But Pastor, any final words?
No, wishing everybody just a wonderful holiday season. And as we move toward Christmas, great time to lift Jesus up.
Absolutely. Amen. All right. Well, we will see you next week here on the Ricecast. Until then, be blessed and go out and share the word.